The idea that the borders would remain closed for a long time and that I couldn't see my family was a problem, so I decided to leave.
In a crisis, I think the French government would protect us more than the Colombian government.
By law, the French state can't stop people from coming back. It's as simple as that.
Welcome to a new edition. I'm Nadia Sharby, and this week we're putting the focus on France's expat community. For these French nationals living abroad, the pandemic played out in a very different way, from political responses to personal and professional consequences, not forgetting health systems and travel bans. Each nation had its own way of handling the crisis, leaving many feeling that in times of trouble, there really is no place like home.
For the last 10 years, the month of February looked like this for Blandine Vallet, a French expat living in Australia. But this year, she returned home with her husband and 2 kids.
The idea that the borders would remain closed for a long time and that I couldn't see my family was a problem, so I decided to leave. It's a choice many French people in Sydney wouldn't make because the COVID situation is much better there. But I wanted to be with my family. I don't regret it at all, to be here and to live through these difficult times with them rather than to be far away.
For Laura Pulverai, it was about being closer to her elderly father. At 36, she spent more than half of her life in Colombia, where she gave birth to her 2 children. But the health crisis changed everything. The company she worked for as a lawyer closed its doors.
I believe that for less wealthy countries like Colombia, it's a lot more complicated. It will be harder for us to find work. And we really see that vaccines are coming slowly. There's a lot of politics that affects it too.
She's decided to return to France in the spring.
Here, if we don't have a job, we have nothing. There's no help. In a crisis, I think the French government would protect us more than the Colombian government.
In Washington, D.C., many schools have been online for much of the past year, a fact that pushed this French family to send their 7-year-old daughter, Charlotte, back to France to live with her grandparents, and where she could attend class in person.
Would she be happier with us? Well, she'd be with us, but she's over there to learn. For a first-grade girl who's learning to read, virtual classes just don't work.
Across the Atlantic, Charlotte appears to be thriving.
I can read and I can write.
She's following the classes well, and things are also good because we get to have the grandchildren over. When things are going well for Charlotte, things are going well for us.
Despite missing her parents and her brother, Charlotte has adapted well to her life in France, where she's finishing elementary school.
To tell us more about how expats are handling this crisis, I've come to meet French diplomat Laurence Haguenauer, who's in charge of French citizens abroad and consular matters. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you for coming to my office.
Now, how widespread is this phenomenon of French citizens cutting short their expat experience?
We know that actually on January 1st, 2021, 1.6 million French people were abroad. From what we evaluate, it's about 2.5 million who actually live abroad. The reasons of leaving, of cutting short, as you say, an expatriation are multiple, actually. This year, of course, the crisis is the major reason. Economic consequences, social consequences, the family who stayed in France or in another country. But it's not the only one. Brexit is one of the major reasons, of course, because people left the United Kingdom. Another reason is the student stays. The students postponed their prospect of studying abroad.
And what support do you currently offer French expats, and is the ultimate aim always to allow them to stay abroad?
We wanted the French community to stay in the country where they live. So we had a very special 3-level program installed by the Minister of Foreign Affairs. First step was actually a medical and sanitary plan to help French people to have access to remote consultation, to have access to medicine, and ultimately for people who actually got ill from COVID-19 could get repatriated to France. Second part of the plan was education. It was a mean to help our French system abroad, and it was important for us to maintain French schools abroad so that people can actually stay in their countries. And the largest part actually was the social plan. That was very important to help the people to face the consequences, the economic consequences of a loss in revenue due to COVID-19.
Well, going to those living outside the Schengen area, since January 31st, those nationals are no longer allowed to enter or leave French soil without a compelling motive. That's led to a very vocal backlash online under the hashtag #IWantToGoHome. A petition is doing the rounds and some are even suing the state now. Let's take a listen to a few of those reactions before we give us your thoughts.
By law, the French state can't stop people from coming back. It's as simple as that. It's a constitutional matter. It's even in a treaty. It was a European Union treaty signed by France in 2014.
My parents aren't dying, so I can't use that reason to go back, even though they're quite old. My mother's already had a stroke and my father's in remission after cancer, but it's still not enough.
It's not the French state that actually controls these special circumstances, it's the airlines. That means that the French state has given private companies the right to check your medical records, for example.
Do you understand why these expats feel they're being treated like, quote, second-rate citizens while their European counterparts can travel with a simple PCR test?
I can understand their feeling of being angry and being not happy to be able to go back to France easily. We didn't take those measures lightly. It's always possible to come back to France, as you say, with a compelling motive. And this is those are familiar reasons, medical reasons, parents who have custody of their children. But it is important to know that everybody must be responsible in this fight against the virus. So those measures are temporary. Regarding the United States, it's the country where the virus is really very widely spread. So it was important to be able to stop the virus, to stop also or to refrain people from traveling. But they are never actually stopped from coming to France. They can always come when they have a compelling reason. In France too, people have to make concessions. So I think it's difficult for everyone.
And the current priority now is vaccination. In France, the government has chosen to inoculate all residents, whether French or foreign nationals. Is that a reciprocal undertaking abroad?
We don't know yet. We don't know yet in every country. So first we have to know how it's going to happen in every country. And we have to know, of course, it will be depending from the evolution of the offer in vaccination. What we do is we'll never forget and we will never let down the French people abroad. First principle is subsidiarity. So where French people can be inoculated the vaccine in their country, that will be the principle. It will be, from what we know, most of the cases. For the other cases, it will also always be possible for French people to get inoculated in France when it will be possible to travel again easily. And that will be, of course, depending on the French strategy of vaccination, when people, depending on their age and when they come back. And for the last part, we will deal that in the case-to-case strategy. We don't know yet everything, and it's still really in reflection. We will have to know how it evaluates to adapt our strategy.
Laurence Haguenauer, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, despite all these obstacles, for some expats, this crisis has only strengthened ties with their chosen home from home, including in the eye of the storm. In Wuhan, where it all began, these residents rose to the challenge, each in their own way.
Wuhan, China, now bustling with life. Just 1 year ago, the coronavirus was rampaging through this city of 11 million. No one here has forgotten the terrible winter of 2020, nor the heroes of the city's lockdown. Among them, delivery volunteers like Frédéric Domecq. He's French, a former soldier turned language teacher who's lived in Wuhan for 8 years. When the city was blockaded, This 55-year-old from Lyon signed up to transport food and supplies.
There were a lot of sick people all over Wuhan. We didn't know anything about this disease, how dangerous or deadly it was.
2,000 volunteers in hazmat suits. Apart from ambulances, they were the only ones authorized to move through the city, day and night, from warehouses to hospitals.
It was put in place quickly to be able to bring supplies, both for medics and for sick people.
His efforts appreciated especially by his fellow volunteers.
We're brothers in arms.
This hotel employs yet another Frenchman who experienced the city's tragedy from the inside. Restaurant director Cédric Martin was locked in for 76 days with staff and guests.
The terrace was the only place we could go out, as we had closed off the hotel entirely to avoid any infection from the outside.
This company makes fiber optic cable for internet connections. Director Ludovic Robert's sales are skyrocketing. The sector overall not so much hit by the crisis as boosted by it.
In the fiber optic arena, lockdowns have driven demand because people need to communicate, and that's something that never stops.
He's staying in Wuhan to grow his business, but he's the exception rather than the rule. Fewer than 300 French citizens now remain there, down from some 900 1 year ago.
And that's how we're leaving this edition. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to France 24.
France 24 es rigurosidad, precisión y responsabilidad. Somos una familia comprometida con el periodismo y la verdad.
C'est une des seules chaînes d'infos où on nous laisse jouer en plateau avec des Legos, avec des robots, avec tout un tas d'objets.
We take a return ticket to revisit some of the key people and places of the last 50 years of world television news.
على فرانس 24 يمكننا أن نحاور أصحاب القرار من العالم في كل الميادين ولدينا المساحة لكشف ثنايا مسيرتهم.
Aquí en France 24 tenemos a varias personas de distintos países, algo que es un reflejo de cómo es Latinoamérica, con culturas muy distintas. Y allí es muy bonito encontrar que en el deporte todos tenemos algo en común.
Les femmes, elles sont souvent victimes de l'actualité internationale, mais ce sont aussi des actrices majeures de la géopolitique. Et d'ailleurs, on en parle dans France 24.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.